Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. The brewing stopped making beer and started making Molotov cocktails. They reached out to the brewing community for help.
Little Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
I'm looking at a text that I want to share with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Hi, Bob. Something for Joe Lindsley. I am a home brewer, and I just finished my third Brew for Ukraine home brew. I learned about Brew for Ukraine right after the invasion and immediately made my first batch. I have made 2 more on each anniversary, and each time I say, I hope I only brew 1 more batch to celebrate the end of this war. Just my little way of keeping the Ukraine people in my thoughts. And then there's a picture here that he sent of the bottle. It says Brew for Ukraine. This beer is inspired by a beer brewed by Pravda Brewery in Lviv. Joe, I would send you some, but I think you have some over there, don't you?
There is very good beer here, but I'm happy to know that pro-Ukrainian beer is being made in the U.S. And, this is the breadbasket of Europe. There's great grains here. Because Ukrainian agriculture is still very traditional, it's not as corporatized. There's not as many chemicals as you'd find in the U.S. and even in Europe. And so some say that leads to better tasting beer. And that brewery that the listener mentioned, Pravda in Lviv, Pravda means truth. And it's this great brewery on the main square of Lviv. It's like 4 or 5 stories tall. And every night there's a brass band that plays there sort of on a stage hanging in the middle. And it's very popular, especially with foreign fighters who come here after their missions or before their missions to have a bit of a break. But indeed, there is a great beer tradition here. And it continues. You need these saints to sustain you during difficult times. So I look forward to trying that on the day of victory back in the U.S. on the victory tour. Meanwhile, here, it's calm here in Lviv today. Last night, Iranian drones hit the city of Kharkiv. And we also have more stories trickling out about what happened on Sunday afternoon in Kharkiv city, and then especially at that recreation ground at the edge of Kharkiv. And, what happened, it was a pool complex on a lake where people had gone for some Sunday refreshment just to relax and be in nature. And the Russians did a double tap strike there. They hit twice. So they hit once, and then they waited for rescue workers to arrive, and they hit again. There's a story today of a 22-year-old Anastasia. She was one of the victims. She was there at the park by the lake, and a doctor had arrived to put a tourniquet on her. And then right at that moment, the second missile hit, and as a result, the doctor lost his arm as he was trying to help this woman, Anastasia. So just a micro look at how awful that scene was on Sunday. And, I think as we look at, the fighting is it's very intense. Just a few miles from there, just north of Kharkiv city, about 12 miles. The Russians have been, they've really been destroying that city of Volchansk right on the border. And it's the Ukrainians are still containing it. The Russians in the first few days of that advance, about 10 days ago, moved in a few miles pretty easily. But the Ukrainian lines are deeper by design into Ukrainian territory, and the Russians have not reached the main defensive line of Ukraine. But what we're hearing is that, Ukrainians are very limited in how they can fight there. They have to be very careful. They can't use any American ammunition that might hit anything on Russian soil. And the Russians, there's a lot of speculation about what the Russians were trying to achieve by this incursion. The Economist magazine from the UK reported that, I don't know how they got these documents, but that the Russians were hoping that within 72 hours they could be at the edge of Kharkiv city to fire artillery on that city. Obviously, they're nowhere near that happening. Others think this was a diversionary tactic to move Ukrainian resources away from Donbass in the east and up to the north in Kharkiv. But we do see Ukrainians holding the line there. But it's also this moment is starting to congeal a new chorus of people, surprising people sometimes, calling for the United States to give Ukraine permission to hit Russian targets on Russian soil, something that I've reported very often that Ukrainians have been asking for, and now it's starting to become more mainstream. Nate Mook, he's the former CEO of the World Central Kitchen. that global nonprofit founded by the great chef Jose Andres. And he's now basically all the time in Ukraine, helping evacuate pets and people, as he says. And he posted on X today, he said, I just spoke with friends in the border region, Ukrainian soldiers fighting near Vovchansk, north of Kharkiv. He says, I've never heard them this upset before. They are forced to only use drones to attack the Russians because they can't fire American shells on Russian territory. And so this is starting to become more of a mainstream chorus. And in fact, even in the White House, I guess it was yesterday, Jason Bellini, a reporter from Scripps News, asked Secretary Austin, the American Defense Secretary, whether or not there will be a point where Ukraine can use American weapons to target Russian military assets. The Secretary of Defense, sort of a bit not totally clear in the answer, but still saying that it's really not possible. Maybe there could be some wiggle room when it comes to aircraft, but still this idea that there's no desire to let Ukrainians fire back at Russian assets on Russian soil. And then very notably, Garry Kasparov, the Russian, one of the few sort of very consistent Russian dissidents, the chess master, he on X was retweeting the words of Victoria Nuland. And Victoria Nuland is a longtime American diplomat. She served under both Republican and Democratic administrations at a high level. She's part of the Russian conspiracy theories that she somehow personally created Ukraine's revolution in 2014, which everyone here knows to be ridiculous. But she said she retired this year from her lifelong career in the State Department. She retired as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. And so now as a private citizen, she's free to speak her mind. And that for the first time, she is saying this same thing. She said she doesn't understand why she's, at this point, she says Ukraine ought to be able to hit Russian military targets within Russia, especially just across the border. She said, just look at it in a very narrow way. Why can't the U.S. give permission to Ukraine to hit, not to go deep into Russia, but to hit these Russian missile launchers right over the border from Kharkiv? And so we are starting to see sort of a new chorus. And in fact, much of this criticism is directed not toward President Biden, but toward his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan.
And I see Putin wasted no time speaking with Iran's interim president. He did that yesterday. So it appears there's going to be no change in Iran's help with the war in Ukraine. Right, Joe?
Indeed. And in fact, just last night, there was the Iranian-designed suicide drones that were terrorizing Kharkiv city. And that's why Ukraine did not offer condolences to Iran on the death of its president for a clear reason, because Ukraine knows how Iran has been working with Russia every day in Russia's goal to obliterate Ukraine.
One more thing about that brew for Ukraine. I'm looking at the label here, part of the text from a listener. During the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Pravda Brewing stopped making beer and started making Molotov cocktails. They reached out to the brewing community for help. Within 24 hours, Brew for Ukraine was created. Joseph, I can't wait for you to be in Chicago, and we can toast Ukraine's success with a little Brew for Ukraine.
I look forward to it. I almost forgot about those Molotov days where everyone was making them in 2022. Thank God we're well beyond that now.
Yeah. Hope we stay there. All right. We'll talk tomorrow. Thank you.
Until tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?